Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm Don of Overedge Prop Commissions, and today I wanted to go over my boosted gear that I wore to Anime Expo. Uh, this guy right here garnered me a lot of attention over there, and I was very, very happy and proud as a prop maker that this was, um, so noticed, because I did bust my ass on this prop. It's probably one of the best things I've ever actually produced. So, since I had so many people asking me questions about how I actually went about it, I decided to make a video on the steps that I took and tools I used and different techniques and everything. So, let's get started, actually. Um, as far as tools go, my bread and butter tool is going to be my Dremel. Um, I use that mainly for everything from shaping to smoothing, even sometimes cutting stuff. It's a great, it's a great tool for any prop maker, any cosplayer, actually just anyone in general. With the amount of bits that are out there for it, you can virtually find any use for it. I mainly just use 60 and 120 sanding bits. I do use the polishing and the grinding bits to try to smooth out stuff without tearing off too much material. That's how I sometimes get like very, very smooth edges on things. But yeah, Dremel is the workhorse of my entire workstation, really. Other tools I use are heat gun. Uh, it's got a variable setting. I can go from 1 to 10. It's very, very good if you're trying to heat treat your foam or trying to, shape it. It also works very, very well if you're working in a cold environment and using hot glue. If the hot glue cures, you can use that to, basically bring it back to its gooey state so you can move it and everything. I also used airbrush and spray paint to actually paint the damn thing. Spray paint was used to just get the big areas painted and primed. I used the airbrush to go in and kind of touch up on certain little details that maybe I couldn't get into with like the spray paint without risking oversaturating one area and having it bubble or wrinkle as it was drying. Um, I also used just some basic sculpting tools when I was working with the foam clay, which I'll get into a little bit later in the build. But yeah, other than that, that was really everything that was used besides my own two hands and like just regular sandpaper. But yeah, so getting into the fabrication portion of it, it all it all started with Evil Ted's gauntlet from his gauntlet video, and it was like the gauntlet and shoulder armor video that he made. Basically, what you do is you take a measurement from your wrist to wherever it is you want your gauntlet to end. Take those measurements, maybe add like a quarter to half an inch or so to that measurement when you're working with foam. One thing that I would recommend, and I don't actually have it on hand right now, is taking whatever kind of foam you are working with and making yourself a ruler with it. Because, like Evil Ted had said in the video, when you use foam as like a ruler, especially the one that you're using, you're able to see how it's going to fit around that area, and if you need a little bit more or a little bit less, it gives you a little bit more precision with your measurements. And trust me, it was like night and day for me, because every other one that I've ever made, and I've tried doing it like that, and I've taken an exact measurement with like just a regular fabric ruler, it's always been too short, and then when I try to adjust it, it's too long. So definitely using a foam ruler made out of the foam that you are using mainly for your build is imperative, and it will save you a lot of headaches. Trust me. Um, the materials I used for it, I've got like the one roll right here, is I was actually using SKS Props HD foam. I wasn't able to use any of the 2mm on it this time around. Whenever I have free time to actually work on this guy and possibly other commissions or props for the future, I'm probably going to be using that for more detail pieces and possibly for like glove armor. So that way I'm not using like the bulky stuff and I won't be able to move my hand a whole lot. It'll hopefully have some give. because I would actually like to remake the glove for this one to make it a little more screen accurate and to add more stable armor pieces to where I can actually close my damn hand. Because when I wore the one here, I was maybe from here able to go like this. If I really forced it, I could kind of get a fist, but it was really uncomfortable because of the plastic that I was using for the finger armor. Another thing that I used a lot on this build and a couple other builds, you've heard me rant and rave about the stuff. It's the foam clay from SKS Props as well. You can also get it from TNT Cosplay Supplies, and you can also find some other stuff of it, that other stuff that's like it on like Amazon. It's great stuff, especially if you're trying to fill in seams or trying to get like raised pieces and rounded pieces. The boosted gear, actually, all of these parts right here that are nice and rounded, this is all just foam clay. It's the EVA foam like this. It's 2 pieces of it, really. I just basically cut out some basic pieces that are here, and they were flat right here, so I used the foam clay and just used my fingers to shape this out so it gives it that, you know, that edge look to it. It makes it look a little bit more like how it was in the anime. But it's really great stuff. It does not take that long to dry, or to cure, I should say, not dry, cure. It sands really well. It has basically the same kind of density as EVA foam. Just don't get it wet even after it's dry. Don't let it get soaking wet, because then it'll disintegrate. But it's really, you know, if you're into sculpting, it would probably be a lot easier for someone like you to use. For me, I've never done sculpting before, so I was mainly just winging it and hoping that it turned out well, and I was actually very, very pleased with how it actually turned out, and so was everyone else at AX. But yeah, that pretty much goes over most of the prefabrication. Actually no, it doesn't. So all of my boosted gear that I actually made for this last AX, I actually found official concept art for Issei and the boosted gear, and that was what I mainly went off of. Granted, my scaling wasn't as accurate as it could have been. I ended up making it gigantic again to where it almost encompassed my entire arm, like horns and all. I mean, this thing sits on my arm, my hand sits about here, and yeah, it's about my arm length. It's supposed to not be that big, but it was still a hit. People still enjoyed it. Yeah, I used the official concept art, and I actually made custom templates for myself based on those. So if you were hoping that I would be able to upload some templates and stuff, unfortunately I won't be able to. A couple of my templates actually got either thrown out or destroyed during the building process, because this turns into a nightmare. It's organized chaos that only I know how to find things in. But yeah, I'm hoping somewhere down the line, if I learn like some 3D modeling or something, I'll be able to release some templates for it and give some build advice. But as of right now, I don't have any. I could always try to pull like a couple of my templates and post them up, but unless I have the full thing, it doesn't really make much sense to just upload pieces of a template. I apologize, it's very, very warm here in California. Summer is still lingering. But yeah, let's actually get into the fabrication portion of it. So this guy was a lot of trial and error, because I originally set out to make this thing with no intention of having it completed for AX. This was just going to be like a for fun build that I took my time on. But in 2.5 weeks time, I was able to pump out this guy, and I was extremely pleased. Everyone that was at Anime Expo seemed to enjoy it a lot. Even my coworkers at work who aren't into anime were actually very, very interested in the build itself. So it was really cool for me to be able to bring one of my favorite characters and one of my favorite armor pieces to life and have people like running up to me, basically. It was kind of cool. So as I said, it's kind of a rough build, but if you look in here, this piece right here, that's the piece from Evil Ted. It's one single piece that runs through, and then these pieces right here, all of this is just pieces that are glued on top of it. as you can see, there's also pieces up on top as well. So you have the tube, you have kind of nice little detail pieces, and then detail pieces up here. It was basically a lot of get a base, build on top of it, make it look epic, and as accurate as possible. Now, as you can see, like all in here and stuff, it's like I should have filled this probably with the foam when I had it out, but I wasn't too sure what I was going to do with this area. I wasn't sure if this is where I was going to house the battery or not, and the battery just ended up going up here. And yeah, I kind of completely forgot to seal this, but I'm kind of glad I didn't, because one thing I didn't account for was my hand swelling up. So when I went to go take it off at the end of day one, it took me about 20 minutes to get it off because my hand was about double its size from having my arm at my side all day. So I actually had to feng shui this around, and it kind of broke the seam here a little bit and in here, so it was kind of nice not having the foam clay there because it made it easier to do that. But moving on, I started from, just step back a little bit, I started from the back and worked my way to the front. Because I figured if I can get this right, then most of the scaling for this would just follow suit. And since this is like the base part of it, and then everything else kind of gets stacked on top of one another, it would also enable me to figure out like what kind of spacings I needed to put in between to make it look good. I started out with the elbow guard, and as you can see, if you look a little close, you can see some seam marks in there. That was because I first made it way too small, and then I put on another piece and glued it somewhere else onto the back of the gauntlet, and I was just like, yeah, that looks okay. But then when I started getting other pieces like fabricated and started laying it down, I was like, this thing still isn't long enough. So I had to rip it off again, glue another piece onto it, and then put it on, because I didn't want to cut out a bunch of these in waste material. So instead I just took scrap pieces and kind of cut them down and glued them, and did the best I could to fill it with foam clay, but no one really seemed to mind. Definitely in the future that will be fixed. But yeah. The horns were actually one of the last pieces to get glued, and I'll explain why in a second. But there is just a little spacing piece, a couple spacing pieces in here in the back, so that way it would fit against my arm a little bit better and wouldn't just like rattle. There's a spacer in between this piece and the elbow guard, just to give it some raised look, and then everything else was just kind of stacked on top of one another, and then I just filled it in at the end. As I said at the earlier on in the video, I'm going to call these the wings, all of these. There are separate pieces that I cut out and just kind of glued up, so that way I could use the foam clay to get the nice rounded edge. Because all my other ones, as you can see, I actually have one of my other ones right here right now. Compared to it just being a very flat, sharp edge, you get a very nice, like, rounded, armored edge to it. And it looks a lot more like how it would look in the anime, as I said before. The reason why I saved the horns closer to last was for these back fins, I wanted the horn to look like it was kind of coming out of the wing itself, and I was able to achieve that with the craft foam, or not the craft foam, the foam clay, and the sandwich method for it. It looked really cool. I really dug it. But everything was actually glued together on this with just super glue, and I actually have some of the super glue that I used still left over. So I mainly use contact cement or hot glue for most of my builds. I picked this stuff up because I saw it in a video. I forget which video it was exactly, but this stuff looked like it held really well. It did hold really well. I've had experiences in the past with other types of super glue losing their bond mid-con, and then I'd have to run over to con repair and re-glue it somehow. This stuff held up like a champ. It didn't really break anywhere, and it's a little messy to use, and I almost did get a couple chemical burns on it because I was using an accelerant with it. But this is the stuff I use, called Zap-A-Gap. I got it from an art supply warehouse that was down by my work. I picked up a couple different things. They have a couple different kinds of formulas that I think indicate like its viscosity. This one's like the mid ground, so it's a little more watery. And then I picked up the Zip Kicker accelerant. So basically what this does is if you're trying to marry two pieces together, get the glue down on one piece, and then put this stuff on the other piece that you want to do. And as soon as you get into like close contact with it, you're going to hear it sizzle because it's forcing a chemical reaction to it. Now that also means wear gloves and also wear a respirator as well, because there are chemical fumes coming up. And don't be like me and use your bare fingers, and then when you actually go to join things, you have a little bit of accelerant meeting the super glue that's on your finger, and it burns like a lot. It's very, very surprising. So again, you're going to pick up this kind of stuff or any sort of accelerant that you're going to use with super glue, wear gloves and do it right. Don't be a jackass like me. Learn from my pain. Yeah, like I said, I used the foam clay for the edges, but I also used it for the spine that goes up here. Because for all of these pieces, what I did is when I actually made the template, I cut it down the center, and then after I cut it down the center, I took my blade and I went at an angle so that way when I went to go put the two together, they would make a nice peak. The only thing I didn't account for was how much material I actually cut out the middle, so there was just a giant channel that was there. And I had another idea for said channel, which was going to be to run the LED, but I didn't have enough wire to run it, and I didn't know where I was going to actually house the battery and the light. So what I ended up doing was, after I got the angle right for the peak that I wanted, and I committed to it, and I glued it down, I used the foam clay again when I went to go fill the edges. I used that to actually fill the spine, and after it dried, I just went in with some sandpaper and gave it the nice little peak to it. And hell yeah, love the way it looked. The last part of the build that was kind of essential was the LED, and that was kind of, no pun intended, the crown jewel of the entire thing, because I was mainly walking around with it like this. Then when people asked me to take a picture, I would just flip on the light and they would lose their minds. I am in no way, shape, or form an electronics wizard. I do work in an electronics shop, and I know how to tell you how to do the thing, but I don't know how to do the thing myself. So I knew all the things that I needed to make the light, I just couldn't actually make the light. I don't know how to solder. I'm still trying to learn like different ins and outs of like running LEDs off batteries, because to do it right you need like a resistor and all this different stuff. It's a big pain. But luckily enough, my coworker was kind enough to actually solder the stuff for me, so big thanks to my coworker Ben. But all it is it's a LED strip, and I should have had the sample still. Oh yeah, here it is. I used an LED strip that was big enough to be housed in this little donut. Let me see. It's a little donut right here. So it's along the inside edge of everything in here. Actually, when you flip on the light, you can kind of see the diodes, as you can see. The LEDs have a 9-volt snap, which is the thing that snaps onto the top of a 9-volt, in case you didn't know. It's soldered onto the contacts, onto the copper contacts that are on the LED strip, and then those 9-volt snaps run to a 9-volt battery. That was great. That was really, really cool. The only problem with that is that you can't turn the LED on and off, so you're kind of committed. And since these ones run off of a 12-volt system and a 9-volt battery is a 9-volt, they're not going to be as bright, and after a while it'll get dimmer and dimmer and dimmer and dimmer until there's really nothing left. And I was really kind of bummed about that. And where I decided to put the 9-volt, once I actually put the donut in with the LED, it was damn near impossible to actually get to the battery. I couldn't even get it out because there wasn't anything behind it to stop it from going further into the gauntlet. So again, what my coworker Ben suggested was to take a toggle switch and put it in line, so that way I could actually control the LED, which is exactly what I did. As you can see, there's this little toggle switch in there. And when you flip it on, it turns on the light. When you flip it off, it turns off the light. It was amazing to have at the con. People weren't really expecting that. and hooking it up was super simple. So when you have a 9-volt battery, there's a red and black wire that runs. Or for the 9-volt snap, I should say, not a 9-volt battery. The 9-volt snap that would snap onto the 9-volt itself. There are two wires. There's a red and a black wire. The toggle switch just goes in line in between one of those. Luckily for me, mine actually already had more wire that was on it, so I just had to clip it down and then strip the wire. And then on the 9-volt on the 9-volt battery itself, not 9-volt battery snap itself, you clip one wire and then just put that switch in line, basically strip the insulation away from the jacket, twist the copper wires together, put some electrical tape around it, and you are golden. That was all it took. It took me all but 20 seconds to do, as long as you have the right tools and aren't scared. It's not an AC system, so it's not going to shock you if you fuck it up, but it's good stuff. All in all, like I said, this build took me about 2.5 weeks to do, but that's because I've built about 5 of these prior to this, and each one has gotten progressively better as I've learned different tips and tricks. This has been probably one of my favorite things to build and to unveil at Anime Expo. I'm not sure if I'm going to be bringing any cosplays next year, because I'm most likely going to be working an Artist Alley booth, and I would need something a little more practical to actually help out at the booth. If I do, I don't know if I'm going to be bringing Issei or Archer. I might try to bring something else. But, I mean, it all depends, because I'm going to be starting school again in about a month. I also work full-time, and there's a chance I might be moving in a couple of years, so I got to start helping out my family clear out this house and the garage and the shed and everything, and getting ready